Hey Cupid's crew, welcome to another week of Let's Talk Happily Ever After, where Missy and I talk through rom-coms and try and find how they relate to our everyday lives. Before we get into this week's episode, wanted to share that we also filmed separately an interview with a long-standing icon in the fashion industry and a longtime friend of Paula's, whose interview questions will be sprinkled throughout the interview, so please feel free to keep your ears open for what Barkha has to say. Thanks.
Hello, Cupid's crew. Welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk Happily Ever After.
What a week, Missy. What a week we have. We have a fun guest coming on our show who I think a lot of individuals, especially near the New York area, might know. And it's just such a great movie that we have that we're talking about. And it's very timely because the second movie just came out,
A
and
whole decade after the first one.
which is crazy. And it's crazier because the cast has aged so well. So you wouldn't even think that it's been this long.
I was going to say, I don't think they aged at all.
I know they somehow got younger, and I don't know if that's because of all the products out there or if they have
Yes.
really good genes. But the movie, without further ado, that we're talking about today is Devil Wears Prada.
Which, by the way, I feel so underdressed for today. Like, I feel like for Devil Wears Prada, I should be wearing, not that I should be wearing Prada because I can't afford Prada, but I should be like glamazoned. But you know what? I am Andy Sachs pre-runway right now.
Oh my gosh, that's the right way to think about it, because I actually love, and I have a question for you, but I love how there is that dichotomy in the beginning of the film, but then later on, she's kind of understood how fashion really is such an important part of everyone's lives, whether we subconsciously know it or not. But
Let's just quickly give the brief synopsis and then we can dive right into it. Anne Hathaway, is a recent college graduate with big dreams. Upon landing a job at prestigious Runway magazine, she finds herself the assistant to a diabolical editor, Miranda Priestley, played by Meryl Streep. Andy questions her ability to survive her grim tour as Miranda's whipping girl without getting scorched. This movie was released on June 30th, 2006, and it got a Rotten Tomatoes score of 75%. And of course, the notorious famous cast included Anne Hathaway, Meryl Streep, Emily Blunt, Stanley Tucci, because I just feel like I need to constantly do that when I say his name, and Adrian Grenier. Is that how you say his name? The guy from Entourage?
I'm not the person to ask, to be honest.
Adrian, if you're watching this, apologies.
I mean,
Anyway, what?
I know. I know. It's been so long since this movie has originally come out, but it's just every year I think there's something that makes it come back in the social scene setting. And now I want to ask you the controversial question, because
There's so many with this movie, so
I
I'm
know
excited which one you're going to go with.
our podcast is about our love for rom-coms. And
Mhm.
is this movie a rom-com or not?
I think in the typical sense of a rom-com where it's a man and a woman being romantic, no. I think this is more of, and this was something I wanted to mention to you, I think this was a love letter to New York and the fashion industry, and for girls, women who are trying to make it in the corporate America world. So, yes, there was the romantic element of Andy and what's Adrian's character's name? Nate.
Oh,
Nate.
yes.
Nate. Yes, we have Nate and Andy's, relationship kind of floating in the background, but it's not the forefront where I feel like with most of the rom-coms we've been reviewing, there's a key, couple or several couples kind of at the forefront playing a
Yes.
major role.
I agree. And I think that, to your point, we talk a lot about other movies that could steer more towards the rom, and this could be a rom-com because it has that comedic element. I mean, Emily Blunt's character is majority comical, but I would say definitely more of a rom than a
I would
com.
almost say this movie was a satire to the fashion industry
Yeah.
because I don't know if you know this, but the woman who wrote the book, The Devil Wears Prada, Lauren Weinberger, she was Anna Wintour's assistant at Vogue, and that's supposedly what inspired her to write this book. And you could clearly tell that Vogue, is the example of what runway is. Benny is really being very needy right now, and I'm so sorry. I'm going to try and calm him down.
I think that also because the second movie just came out, which neither Missy nor I, did I say that right grammatically? Neither of us have watched The Devil Wears Prada 2. But because that did come out recently, I've seen a lot of YouTube videos created by, I don't know if it's by Vogue or Condé Nast, or who have interviewed either previous assistants to the real Anna Wintour, who Meryl Streep's character is sort of loosely based off of or heavily based off of.
So Condé Nast owns Vogue.
Okay, yeah. So Condé Nast, I think, came out with these videos of interviewing previous or current, I think, assistants of Anna Wintour. And I just watched some of them briefly, but I do think that a lot of them mention how there are similarities and then also differences from obviously the movie and how the movie dramatized a lot of the realities.
Something that you mentioned before was how the characters in the cast aged really well. I wonder if the whole fashion industry portrayal and the whole world that we're seeing here was portrayed as aged well. Do you think the fashion industry has gotten nicer, for lack of a better word? Do you think women, even this whole toxic work culture that's being portrayed in, regardless of it being the fashion industry, do we think that women or even anyone is still struggling, killing themselves to have to pick between their personal life and their corporate 9 to 5 like Andy had to do in this movie? Or do we think it was just a sign of the times, or it was just over dramatized for the movie? I'd love to get your opinion, and maybe even our guest could offer some opinions on this.
I think a lot of it has stayed the same, to be quite frank. And I think that could be seen positively and also negatively. Positively, because it shows how much of New York's, stance on fashion has remained this strong stalwart. And I love New York. You and I both grew up from around that area, and I love how New York has maintained its role in being the fashion mecca of the world. I think the negative things that haven't changed are still people who are toxic in the work culture, who want to get ahead. And I mean, I think even every year when we see the Met Gala, we see, artists saying in interviews that they hadn't eaten for a week or two. A lot of the things about the fashion industry, I think, have remained the same, which I think is kind of interesting because the first movie, now that I watched it, a couple of times, and I really wanted to rewatch it to have this discussion today, so much of the movie is about weight. And I didn't realize the first time that I watched it. And they do it so flippantly, I want to say. I don't want to be so negative because I love the movie, but I do think that they weren't mindful of how Annie's character wasn't even overweight, but she was looked down upon for being a size 6.
I'm glad you said that, because I think that's also just a sign of the times of the fashion industry, too. Now we are so much more inclusive with curvy and plus size models.
Are we?
Even
I don't know, with Ozempic and everything these days?
okay, compared to back then,
Yeah,
I think we definitely are. And I think that was a very accurate portrayal of what was going on at the times.
yeah.
I personally, when I worked at Hearst, I remember the lunchroom was kind of the same as the lunchroom depicted at Elias Clark Publications. And I remember being like, ooh, I want a grilled cheese for lunch, or I want to get chicken fingers for lunch. And there were some of these girls who were working there who would get their salad or get their sushi or just get their smoothie from Jamba Juice or something. So
Yeah.
I definitely think it's a industry standard for
Yeah.
sure.
No, I agree. I used to work
But
at
I
Rock, and I agree. I think it was interesting what was presented at lunch and who had what.
jokes or commentary on weight throughout this movie. I think me watching it for a second, like 80th time a couple days ago, I noticed that a lot of the jokes that like Stanley Tucci's character makes or even Emily's character make, they're all directed towards weight. Whereas in the beginning, I didn't really catch on to that.
That's what I'm saying. I didn't
Yeah.
have fun in the beginning, but a lot of it is almost to the point where the majority of the movie, at least in the beginning, before she kind of fits in, is about how she doesn't fit in, particularly because of her weight.
Yeah.
But
1000%.
I mean, regardless, let's get into how the movie has kind of aged really well because it's not, like you said, a typical rom-com with a man and a woman and they have a meet cute moment. I still think that there are meet cute moments. We could talk about the meet cute moment between Andy's character and Meryl Streep's character, right? Because they're the forefront.
You literally read my mind. I think because this is a rom-com podcast, we always talk about the meet cute moment. Even though Andy and Nate are an established couple, I think the real meet cute moment we really need to talk about is Miranda and Andy when she goes in for the first interview, or even any moment where Andy's meeting all of these people from Elias Clark for the first time.
Yeah.
But one thing that really stood out to me, and I know that you're as type A as I am, how come Andy did not go in prepared for this interview at all? Like, it baffled me that she even got the interview or got the job based on her interview, because I remember another personal anecdote. When I was applying to Hearst, I literally bought every Hearst publication that was on the newsstand and read every single one before my interview to prep, right? And I was super excited about it. And then in the interview, I started spitting off facts about different ones that I read to like show that I did my research and I knew who like the editor in chief was and all this stuff. And my boss, the guy who became my boss, was like, "Yeah, those aren't the magazines you're going to be working on, but great job with your research." Because they have such a large portfolio. So I focused on like the big ones, but I still knew some of the other ones. Like I knew the other brands in their portfolio. But that goes to my point that Andy shows up and doesn't even know who Miranda Priestley is, doesn't even care about fashion. I mean, you don't have to be passionate about fashion, but you have to know at least, when New York Fashion Week is, or what I guess the benefit is that they're calling the Met Gala in the movie. And it just seemed like she was completely oblivious. I was very surprised that Miranda gave her a chance because she was just so on the level of just being unprepared.
I agree. And can we talk about for a Northwestern grad how that would be unrealistic and keep going on this rant. She also listened to the twins, which really which as a Northwestern grad, why would you listen to the twins when especially Emily's character or Emily, because it's funny because her name is anyway. So
Emily, yeah.
but why would you listen to the twins when you're Northwestern grad and you were specifically told just to put it anywhere on the table and leave? It's better than going up and doing the one thing that Emily said don't do, which
It's like Emily said, you might as well have crawled into bed and had a bedtime story with her.
yeah, no, I think again, Emily's quotes are all iconic, but to your point, that would just not, even if she didn't know anything about fashion, she should have done her numbers. She should have seen, how much the industry grew, XYZ, whatever. But again, I think that that's why she probably was hired, was because Miranda saw that she was different.
I mean, Miranda says later, I chose the one who didn't know anything about fashion, or the fat girl, once again, poking at her weight. It just was, it was baffling to me as someone who over prepares for everything and went into a similar interview situation for a publication, how I knew things I didn't necessarily need to know, but still prepared. And she, like you said, is a Northwestern graduate and seems to do crazy amounts of research for these intensive articles that she's writing that you see her flash through when she's preparing for the interview. And
Yeah.
it really was just a shocker to me. So
I mean,
yes, I loved that moment. And then my other meet cute moment I loved was when her and Stanley Tucci, the first time they meet, I feel like is when he comes in, he's like, did someone have an onion bagel?
oh yeah, you do like that line. I think you told
I
me this
do love
before.
I love that line. But I guess the real meet cute moment is when he comes back with the shoes and he's like, I guess a size 8.5. And it's just like their beautiful friendship from there.
Yes, yes. I think that he always saw a little bit of maybe himself before discovering the fashion industry. in her. So I don't know about his we don't know about his background, but in my mind, I take it that he grew up in a very humble kind of
Well,
upbringing.
we do know a little bit because when Andy has her moment after Miranda scolds her, she goes to Nigel and Nigel says and gives her the whole speech, and you wonder why she doesn't pat you on the back and give you a gold star. He says that he used to be a little boy reading Runway under the covers with like a different magazine as the cover. So he always loved fashion but had to hide it based on based on who he was because he couldn't be
Yeah.
himself.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you're right, we don't know everything about him. So
I do think that he found a little bit of himself in her, which made their relationship very wholesome. I do want to stick on this point about how she was the brains, I guess, if you will, for girls and tropes in movies, particularly rom-coms. And that's what made me like the second guy that she was with. And he really, which I don't know if it's a controversial opinion.
hold on. Are you talking about Christian?
Yeah, I liked Christian.
The manipulative, toxic, masculine freelancer?
No, I don't love him to the point where I think that they would have been great together, but I do think that he took her seriously in terms of seeing her for more than just.
No.
You don't think that he saw her for more than just
No,
beauty?
he wanted to fuck her.
Well, not obviously, but I don't think that we can say that that's not appealing. If a guy thinks that you're attractive, or anybody thinks that you're attractive, that's kind of a nice feeling, even if it's cringe vibes.
Yes. I don't think his motives were as pure and innocent as you think.
Oh,
I did not think that.
They're pure and innocent, but I think that he was a lot more supportive than.
He definitely was more supportive than Nate, for sure.
Yeah, which I don't know. Again, maybe he was just like that in the beginning, but no, I think that because they have similar backgrounds in the journalistic world, I could see them relate on a lot of topics later on.
Totally. And he was very smooth and charming. What really, the moment that it flipped for me that I realized he really wasn't that interested in her as a journalist was at the Met Gala or the benefit. And he's, trying to get her to come in. He's like, give my regards to the boyfriend,
Oh yeah,
or I can introduce you to all these people. And it's like, you're not going to introduce her to these people. You're just trying to get her to come in and get her to have a little
he
drink
did
with you.
kind of wait until she said we're broken up, right? Or am I getting
He
that?
did, but then I also feel like he kind of forced himself on her in Paris.
He definitely did. Again, I don't think that he would be a long-term thing, but
No.
I think he was a good supportive side character when Nate wasn't being. And
Which is why I think she ended up ultimately going towards him and leaning into that more and more, especially at the gallery when she tells him she's going to Paris, because Nate, her friends, no one's being supportive of this career that she's on except for him.
yes, that's another great point because we always talk about how friends, family, or whatever are big parts of the movie and of the main character, it seems. In this movie, I didn't love the friend group as much.
I didn't, but I understood why.
And correction, I think that the guy friend who was sort of more interested in fashion, he was, así así, or in Spanish, it's just same. He was just kind of
Yeah.
there, but I do also see that the girl, but they were also kind of mean when they were throwing things around at the table, and she was trying to take it seriously.
Yeah, no, and I related so much to this movie, especially after I worked at Hearst, because I remember coming home from working at Hearst and bringing home stuff for my friends and family and saying, look at the bag of goodies I got. And I felt like Andy Sachs coming home. And I remember my friends were so happy that I got stuff for them. And so it was so surprising for me to see in Devil Wears Prada that these people weren't as excited. I mean, yeah, of course she was excited when she got the handbag, but then to play kind of the dick friend when Miranda's calling is kind of, just like, hey, be considerate of your friend who's working hard and bringing you goodies that she doesn't need to be bringing you.
Yeah, and especially a role that I think a lot of people, and even in the interview that I saw with the real assistants, everyone kind of knows that this role is not forever. So for that short period of time, you could be supportive if you're a true friend and say, you're totally okay to drop everything and go to this job, which will get you places.
And Andy laid that out for them from the very beginning when she accepted the job. At that first meal, when they're all talking about their jobs and their life, which I thought was so relatable. And she's like, I just got to do it for a year.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like they could have been a little bit more supportive. I mean, I'm sure it took its toll clearly on her relationship with Nate and everything, but I wish it was a different play out. That's when we always talk about something that we would change about the movie, I would have changed that dynamic a little bit. And especially, I would like to have seen Nate be a little bit more supportive, especially when she's up that one night about to make the decision about whether she's going to tell Emily she's going to Paris. And Nate's just like, are you coming back to bed? And she's like, yeah, soon. I wish Nate would have been like, hey, what's wrong? What's on your mind?
Yeah.
Just to kind of redeem him a little bit, you know?
Yes. Okay, my question to you is, why do we think this movie got 75% on Rotten Tomatoes?
I mean, it's hilarious.
The hilarious moments were kind of minimal compared to, I think the storyline was so original for its time.
Hey, Cupid's crew, I'm going to pause really quickly and introduce you to my friend Barkha, who is an icon in the fashion industry. She owns Bollywood Closet in Atlanta and is very familiar to the fashion industry in New York and has recently moved over to where I am today, which is how we got to know each other. But I really wanted to introduce her take on a couple of things because Devil Wears Prada is one of her favorite movies. And so here is just a really quick answer from her about her first time watching Devil Wears Prada and kind of why she loves the movie.
Hi, Barkha.
Hello.
Do you mind introducing yourself really briefly to our listeners and kind of telling us more about when you started loving fashion and knew it was your career?
I'm Barkha Jayaswal. I'm the owner for the Bollywood Closet, and we deal with very high-end fashion from Indian designers that I represent here in India, from India here in the US. I always liked fashion. I think growing up as a child, I remember, trying to figure out how those gowns were made on television or the movies that I watched, and I really didn't know. So all I used to do is wrap my mom's clothes around me and feel that, I was wearing gowns. But I did my MBA, came to US, I was doing my regular corporate stuff. It is one of the biggest designers from India, Sabyasachi, that happened to be my childhood friend, and he made me realize that my place was in fashion. And that's how we started my company, the Bollywood Closet, and now I work more as a stylist to my high-end clients, and fashion is now a part of my life, I guess.
This week we talked about Devil Wears Prada on the show.
Oh my God,
Do you remember the first time you watched it and what you felt when you were introduced to all of the characters for the first time?
Okay, before we say the first time, I think I watched it over 200 times, since it got released. So the first time I watched, it took me 2 or 3 times to watch to finally figure out what I had taken out of the movie. The first time was, of course, pure entertainment. I've always loved Meryl Streep, but to watch her play Anna Wintour was fun. As I said, I watched the movie so many times. It brings out not just the fashion, but human emotions in a way that's always stayed close to my heart. And of course, just the way the people connect or, they work together in a fashion environment has been very interesting. And later, of course, when I got myself into the fashion world, going back and understanding, what they were talking about, how stylists work, it's all in the movie. So I can go on talking about it.
Would you say that Devil Wears Prada gets the fashion industry right, especially because you used to live in New York?
Yes, pretty much so. Of course, there are some parts that's over-exaggerated. One is definitely you cannot walk into a closet full of Gucci's and Pradas and Chanel's and just wear it out. That does not happen in real life. But then the stress of running, how fashion is run, how models work, because I have worked with big designers and worked backstage. That pressure is real, what they show. In fact, sometimes it can even get worse than what you see in the movie, for sure.
Last question is, when you think about fashion, do you think about romance?
100%. You cannot be romantic if and not have fashion in it. I mean, think about it. You want to go on a date, you want to dress up well. And for me at my age, earlier, and let me just say, earlier I used to dress for others, now I dress for myself. But for any occasion, fashion plays a very important role, subtly or not subtly. It elevates your mood, it elevates who you are, and it talks about your personality. So yes, fashion is a part of our lives.
Thanks, Barkha.
Thank you.
I was gonna say, I think it's an original kind of almost in-depth analysis, like the E True Hollywood story, but not the E True Hollywood story. You know what I mean? Like it's a world that not many people have access to. And so I think that's why it was so appealing to the public.
Yes, and I think another reason why it was probably so appealing was because there are a lot of different kind of levels, whether it's societal levels, right? I mean, Andy grows up, not really caring about her looks as much, cares more about studying, and then there's the society that cares a lot about fashion, etc. But I think what really hit home for a lot of people probably was seeing a lot of the truths that come from the fashion industry. For me, for example, I really think that there were two parts where Miranda's character really stood out to me as a kind of impressive character. One was when, Andy's laughing about the two cerulean belts or whatever. And Miranda literally is as sharp as a nail and has that perfect comeback as to you're laughing, but you're a byproduct of this fashion industry.
Another reason why you and I are just meant to do podcasts together, because I had that same exact thought written in my notes.
Yes, that part I think really hit home for me. And I said, okay, yes, we are starting to understand how much Miranda's character is very, you know, a depth character, a depth kind of character. And then the second part that really hit home was when they're in Paris and Miranda says, well, you are sort of an evil person too, if you want to be, because you took this opportunity from Emily without even thinking about it for a second. Like Miranda's character was just so spot on. And I think that's impressive for me because I can't be as articulate and have that lawyer-esque comeback and mentality that I think I find personally endearing because I just don't have that wit.
I think the way that she, in both of those moments, responded was very Miranda. Like if she had did it any differently, I don't think it would have come across that way. And like you said, that first scene is constantly quoted and always comes off as, oh, cerulean or blue, and people laugh about it. But the way she explained it is very much how the fashion industry works and how the world is. So I loved the way that she explained that. I think I appreciated it now more than I did when I first watched the movie the first couple of times. And then I loved the little knife twisting in the car in Paris, that second scene that you talk about, where she's like, well, and where Andy says, I couldn't have done what you did to Nigel. And she's like, well, you did it to Emily. And is like, you kind of sold your soul and you sold yourself, sold yourself to this industry. And it just goes to show you Miranda really is the reason why she is Miranda Priestley, and there is no one else like her.
Mm-hmm. I also want to take a moment as we're appreciating the movie and these scenes. Again, it goes back to who was in the writer's room. And I think two people really influenced the writing of this movie. It was Lauren Weisberger, who wrote the original book in 2003. And then it was Aline Brosh McKenna, if I'm saying her name correctly, I hope, who wrote the 2006 screenplay. And I think that first of all, it's really admirable that these two are women who wrote this and directed kind of a lot of how these scenes were meant to play out. But I also think that there is this element of this perfect balance between authentic life in maybe the real Vogue fashion industry and then the Hollywood drama. I think this movie was just so perfect because it had that great balance of every little thing.
I agree. I don't think one side was over dramatized or fictionalized too much. I think it really made its point very clear and honest.
It was really great because it had the perfect balance of comedy and romance. Good.
So I want to ask you a question, and it's a big question that was constantly on the internet for quite some time. And now since the second movie came out, I saw it start to resurface. everyone likes to say that the real villain of the Devil Wears Prada first movie was not Miranda, it was Nate.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we've talked about this obviously in the beginning, but like, what do you think about that?
I think there's room for two, right? There's room for the devil, who could be a character, and then there could be a room for a villain. Because let's be honest, New York City always has a villain, and I think Nate is that villain. And I agree because he was not supportive, and he's even hypocritical because if he was so mad at her for being in this fashion industry, then why did he also have these googly eyes for when she came back and was dressed all fancy?
I also think we as viewers expect the boyfriend or the significant other to show up in a different way than we would expect your boss to show up.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why viewers maybe were more disappointed with Nate, because he's supposed to be the one who loves her no matter what and is there for her. And he clearly just wasn't there for her. Whereas your boss isn't in a relationship with you. They're supposed to just tell you what to do. Not that they should bother you as much as they bother Andy, but Miranda, there wasn't an expectation of some sort of respect. No, I don't want to say respect because there is a level of respect that you need to have for your coworkers and your employees, but there just wasn't a certain level of decency, if that's the right word to use.
I agree. I also do find it appealing, though, at least maybe because this is the toxic side of New York me, I think, where those kinds of characters who are so successful in what they do and are who they are unapologetically, again, I find admirable in a way because I can't ever do that. I'm always apologizing. I'm always looking at how other people think of what I'm doing. I'm a golden retriever in that regard where I really need that reassurance. And
Yeah.
I like these kinds of characters who show how you can still be and go far in what you do without having that golden retriever mentality, which I think is what I'm looking forward to seeing in Devil Wears Prada 2. We haven't talked about Devil Wears Prada 2, but I hope that they have introduced characters in Devil Wears Prada 2 who are more strong, bold characters who can really show women that we can be really successful and be unapologetic, but be maybe a little bit more wholesome. Because I don't think Miranda's character screams wholesome necessarily.
No, but I want to go on record and say that I think Miranda Priestley is the best anti-hero in cinematic history.
She obviously has feelings. I mean, when she turns back and even when she at the reason why I love the ending so much is because she still put in a good word for Andy and said,
Oh, that recommendation when she's like, she's the biggest disappointment, but you'd be an idiot not to hire her. She was a proud mama.
Yes, exactly. So she's not a devil, or maybe she is a devil, but even devils can have this moment of goodness.
The entire movie, you find yourself wanting to hate her because of how she's treating Andy. But at the same time, you can't help but respect her and smile because you have to, as someone who you and I have both worked our way up in our careers, you can't just become Miranda overnight. You have to work your ass off to get to where you are. So there's a certain amount of respect you do have to have for her. And especially seeing her compared to Anna Wintour, Anna didn't get to where Anna was. Not that I can call her Anna because we're not on a first name basis, but especially being a woman. And I think Andy even said it when she was on her date with Christian in Paris. If Miranda was a man, no one would question how tough she was or how mean or how ruthless of a boss she was. But because she's a female, she's constantly compared. So I really appreciate and love Miranda Priestley's character because I honestly am constantly like, oh, she's showing some feeling, especially at the end in Paris when she announces her divorce to Andy and they're having a little heart-to-heart moment and she has no makeup on.
Yeah.
And you kind of see the mask literally come off of Miranda and then 5 seconds later she's like, that's all.
Yeah. But that's the thing. That's where my New York the toxic New York me comes out. I never wanted to hate her character. I was always secretly obsessed with her character.
Okay.
Obviously I think she could have been nicer, and I don't, but I know that if I had to work under her, I would have wanted to do anything to get her approval, just like Andy
Yeah.
in that. So in that regard, I see myself a lot in Andy's character because I would have wanted, for some reason, the people who are kind of mean and cutthroat like that are the people that I kind of am wary of a lot more. If that makes sense. But not saying that I discredit people who are really nice and friendly. I mean, I have a whole other kind of respect for people who get to where they are by being super kind, being really generous.
Yeah.
It's a whole different kind of respect. But I have respect for both characters, both types of people. One question that I did want to bring up, because you mentioned how if she were a man, but the same kind of question applies for Nigel's character when he didn't get that promotion at the end. And I wonder if it's because he was more of an LGBTQ plus, because he's still a man and he should have gotten promoted a long time ago by original man standards. But that was a question that I had, was why has he been kept off for so long?
Because I think he was complacent and comfortable. I don't think he ever really spoke up for himself or defended himself.
But I think it's also because he was probably LGBTQ plus in today's standard.
Yes, but to play devil's advocate here, isn't the fashion industry the place where LGBTQ plus population is most accepted?
Today.
Okay.
And even then too, but I think there's still a difference between how much we support them today versus back then. You know, that was their safe outlet, but it still was a big difference between if you were a man who made it with being the male tycoon versus just a really strong guy with a good fashion sense. But anyway, I don't want to take away from how great this movie was. I love this movie. I agree 75% is a great review. I want to share one of my favorite quotes that is so applicable to my life today, Missy, and it's the I love my job, I love my job, I love my job.
I love it. Get it? I love it. Before we have our guests come on and we ask her all of our amazing questions, this movie was I had my own Devil Wears Prada moment when I was an intern. I was interning at the Shark Group when I was in college, and I was there my overall time there was for 3 years, but my first internship was with the speaking division, and it was so much fun. I loved hanging out with those people. I had such great interns. I had such great bosses in that department. However, I didn't want to leave because I loved my internship so much, so I decided to go to a different department. And the different department happened to be with someone who is not in any way on the same level as Miranda Priestley, but she basically ran the Shark Group and she was the head boss. She was the head of brand marketing, and I wanted to learn from her. I knew she was respected. I loved her. I wanted to learn from her. So I was like, I want to be your intern. And I remember she sat me down and she was like, just so you know, this isn't going to be an easy internship like it was with your one before, where you were always constantly walking around, talking to everyone, hanging out, chilling. I'm putting you to work. I'm going to make you do stuff. So it's not going to be fun. And I remember having my own little Andy Sachs moment where I went to the bathroom and kind of cried a little bit because I was like, is that how she sees me? That I'm not a serious person, that I just like to talk and, I'm not getting shit done. And I, in that moment, was like, Missy, we're going to flip the switch. We're going to show that we can work, and I'm going to be the best damn intern she's ever had. And I ended up staying with her for 2 years after that. We are still in touch to this day. And it's funny because everyone at the internship was like, I can't believe you survived Leslie. I can't believe that you lasted that long. And I praise her, and I'm still she's my mentor still to this day. And I literally, I called it my Devil Wears Prada moment because I literally cried in the bathroom. I called my friend who was my Nigel at the time and was like, what do I do? And it really impacted me and helped create like who I am in the work world today. So I just wanted to share that little anecdote. And that I love Leslie, and I'm no way comparing you directly to Miranda Priestley, but I love you.
That's so wholesome. I actually have a very similar moment now that you bring up your own stories, and he's actually a Blair alum. But it's a guy too. So it's not a woman, but I had a hard time getting the gist of what he was trying to, I guess, instill in me. And he was such a long-term veteran in his industry in journalism. We used to work out of the National Press Club together in Washington, D.C., Rob Weiner, and I love him. I love the experience that I had, but I will say that it's one of those experiences where you don't realize how deep you are in the trenches until you can leave it and then say, wow, that's how, you know, how much I had worked at that time. At least that's where I think you and I differ. You had that before and you said, I'm going to make this switch and I'm going to really work hard. Whereas for me, I knew in the back of my mind that I had to survive. And look back now, I realize just how much I had gone through. But all to say, I'm very excited to talk to our guest and see and hear what she has to say because she's a veteran in the New York fashion industry by now. I mean, she's kind of she is such a hero in that sense of really making it as a woman who is in her 20s. And I'm very excited to hear what Katrina has to say. One question that I have for you before we end, Missy, is what you're looking forward to kind of seeing in Devil Wears Prada 2, because neither of us have seen it. And I want to hear from our listeners in terms of if you have seen it, what you were excited to see or didn't get to see more of.
And did it meet your expectations?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the thing for me. I read all 3 books.
Oh.
So I'm going into Devil Wears Prada 2 expecting it to be like the second book, but it's not like the second book. So automatically I need to adjust my thinking. Second is I think I have such a high expectation because they waited so long for it to come out and because of the standard of the first movie.
Mm-hmm.
I'm expecting bigger fashion, bigger celebrity cameos. I mean, even the budget for the film, here's a spill the popcorn, was $35 million for the first movie, and it was over $100 million for the second movie. So I'm expecting things to be bigger, better, bolder, like, wow. That's what I'm expecting. And based on some of the clips and the reviews I've seen, I think I'm going to be happy with it. But I also really want to make sure there's still that heart of the story that we get from Andy from the first movie. So I'm excited to see how that plays out.
Yes, me too. I think we will see later on this year because we're going to watch it. And
1,000%.
a part 2 of this. So thanks so much.
Yes. When we do Devil Wears Prada 2, I'm going to come back on and be whoosh, post Andy runway. Thanks, guys. See you next time.